Today is Labor Day. Now I hear you, dear viewer. Oh no, I've slipped into a deep slumber and slept until September. How could this happen? I have to see a doctor right now. I might have some sort of neurological condition. I didn't even notice. I thought today was the 1st of May. How is this even possible? I didn't eat any food or move for 4 months. How have my muscles not atrophied? And no, you're confused. Let me set your mind at ease. May 1st, May Day, is the real Labor Day, or International Workers' Day. The other Labor Day, the one celebrated in September, was popularized as propaganda designed to divorce Labor Day from its radical roots, to stop the labor movement from remembering its own history, the ways that it had been brutally suppressed by capital and the state. And I think it worked! It's just a long weekend, a nice little break from work. And we need that because our work is just so frustrating and alienating and has been ever since the labor movement declined in power. Weird coincidence. Who cares why we have 8-hour work days? You don't have time to care because you're too busy on a 12-hour workday trying to hold down 2 jobs or working in the gig economy where you're expected to hustle all day just to keep your head above water. The people that you're working for certainly don't want you to know about your intellectual forebears who fought and died to prepare a better world for you. They don't want you to know that we can fight back. They want to delegitimize the entire concept of fighting back by trying to erase any historical precedent for doing so. May Day started as a pagan holiday celebrating, spring shit. It was probably really horny. From what little I've read about its ancient roots, it sounds like it was basically like a less murderous version of the movie Midsommar, complete with like dancing around a maypole and crowning a May Queen. A lot of countries still celebrate this way, and a lot of traditional May Day celebrations, blah blah blah, who cares, this isn't relevant. Fast forward to 1886. The Federation of Organized Trade and Labor set May 1st as the day when the United States would accept the 8-hour workday as standard. Pretty simple demand. You have 8 hours for sleep, 8 hours for leisure, 8 hours for work. Perfectly balanced, as all things should be. A major improvement from the previous standard of, work until you can't anymore. Though personally, I think that 134 years later, the fact that we're still so content with this arrangement that our bosses feel comfortable gradually starting to roll it back should be a point of shame and anger for all people who work for a living. Anyway, it didn't happen, so a bunch of trade unions were like, hey, fuck this, fuck all of this, let's have a general strike, fuck you. Upwards of about 500,000 US workers just stopped. They didn't go to work, they didn't make money for their bosses. They actively shut down factories and industry. They were just like, nah, no work. Not until we get the things we want. And no one else is going to come here and work neither. Take note of this. File that away in the back of your noodle, because it's going to become relevant later on when we talk about the today portion of this video. Anywho, the biggest demonstrations for this general strike took place in Chicago. On May 3rd, there was a demonstration by the Lumber Shovers Union. 6,000 members were in attendance. Also present were about 500 striking workers from the McCormick Harvesting Machine Company. They'd been locked out of their workplace and violently harassed by police and strikebreakers, and the factory was close to where the meeting was being held with the lumber shovers. I don't know what a lumber shover does. Anarchist labor organizer August Spies gave a speech, and shortly thereafter, there was a violent confrontation between striking McCormick workers and strikebreakers. Police opened fire on the crowd and killed 2 workers. Now you can imagine that murder did little to ease tensions. The next day, there was a rally at Haymarket Square to protest these murders and demand justice. If you've heard the word Haymarket before, you've probably heard it followed with massacre or martyrs. Or maybe press. So this didn't go great for them. There were some speeches from anarchist labor organizers. Everything was going fine. The mayor was there and he said it looked chill and advised the police reservists waiting to come fuck shit up just to go home. And then what happened instead, was a shitload of police showed up just as the rally was dying down and there were only about 200 people left, and ordered the crowd to disperse while the crowd had been in the process of dispersing. Anyway, a homemade bomb was thrown at the police, probably by protesters, but maybe by Pinkerton saboteurs. There were gunshots, no one's quite clear who was shooting who. We do know the police shot at least 40 people, at least 7 cops and 4 workers were killed, and at least 60 cops and God knows how many workers were injured. These injuries may have been from the bomb, or the indiscriminate firefight the police erupted in right afterwards. We don't know. So the police were like, okay, I guess we can't have socialists or anarchists anymore. Oh well. And they raided a bunch of anarchist meeting halls, unions, and homes, gathering up anyone they could find who had the bad, wrong ideas to arrest and torture. You know, how like in America it's illegal to say or think the wrong things. So 8 men were arrested for posterity. Their names were Albert Parsons, August Spies, Adolf Fischer, Oscar Neebe, Louis Ling, George Engel, Michael Schwab, and Samuel Fielden. They were sort of given one trial rather than individual trials. I say sort of because it wasn't a real trial. Instead of a random jury of their peers, the jury was selected personally by a special bailiff appointed by the prosecution, who was publicly quoted as saying, "I'm managing this case, and I know what I'm about. These fellows are going to be hanged as certain as death." A fact which the defense was forbidden from entering into evidence. Among the jury were local rich guy business owners who, aren't exactly impartial when it comes to socialist agitation, clerks of those rich guy business owners, and a relative of one of the police officers who died. If this seems conspiratorial, if it seems like these men were put on trial for their beliefs rather than whether or not they had actually been involved in a crime, yeah, pretty much that's what they did. In his closing argument, State's Attorney Julius Grinnell said out loud, "Law is on trial. Anarchy is on trial. These men have been selected, picked out by the grand jury, and indicted because they were leaders. They are no more guilty than the thousands who follow them. Gentlemen of the jury, convict these men, make examples of them, hang them, and you save our institutions, our society." No evidence was presented that any of these men had taken part in the bombing, planning or organizing the bombing, approving the bombing, and only 3 of them were even there on the day of the bombing. One of them, Albert Parsons, had brought his 2 children to the rally, which kind of implies he didn't know that a bomb was going to be set off. And multiple eyewitnesses could corroborate that none of them, at least, had thrown the bomb. They were just famous anarchists, community leaders. That's why they were really on trial. And that's according to the prosecutor. That's not my opinion. Shockingly, all 8 men were convicted. Oscar Neebe was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The other 7 men were sentenced to death, though Schwab and Fielden later had their sentences commuted to life imprisonment. Louis Ling took his own life by putting an explosive device in his mouth and setting it off, a final act of defiance. George Engel, August Spies, Albert Parsons, and Adolf Fischer were hanged. 6 years later, in June of 1893, after mounting pressure, Illinois Governor John Peter Altgeld issued a pardon, declaring them innocent of the crimes they were accused of, and the victims of, quote, hysteria, packed juries, and a biased judge. By 1891, the Second Internationale had declared May 1st the annual celebration of the anniversary of the Chicago protests. Since then, participants have celebrated struggles and victories of the labor movement, both historical and contemporary, each year on May 1st, Labor Day. So how come the United States and Canada celebrate Labor Day on the first Monday of September, the unofficial last day of summer, and the last day it's appropriate to wear white clothing for some reason? Enter America's first Muppet president, Grover Cleveland. He didn't like that Americans might get some pinko ideas from being reminded each year of the time that the state cracked down on a bunch of anarchists, and how those anarchists were protesting a series of injustices that had been imposed by the state to suppress the call for an 8-hour workday. Because anyone who hears that story would be like, yo, thanks anarchists, that's pretty tight. Pretty fucked up how the government responded though. That's not tight. Luckily for him, while the initial hysteria about the Haymarket affair was ongoing, the Knights of Labor, a labor organizing group at the time, was like, whoa, hey, whoa, we're not with those guys. That's not our thing. We say Labor Day should be like, I don't know, first Monday of September or whatever. Cleveland was like, yeah, that sounds good. That's the law now. I'm going to make that one the law. As if this couldn't be more dystopian, in 1955, Dwight D. Eisenhower declared May 1st to be Loyalty Day, the day where Americans reaffirm their loyalty to the United States, to counter the holiday commemorating how radicals had been murdered for their beliefs. Do you catch the implication? Don't step out of line. Instead of remembering the people who were killed for agitating for the rights you enjoy now, declare your undying loyalty to the apparatus that killed them. And that sounds like some Cold War Red Scare bullshit, but every sitting president since then has made an official Loyalty Day proclamation ever since. It's still a thing in a very cool and normal country. As for Canada, we adopted the fake Labor Day too because our little baby state is desperate for the approval of its big brother. It's not really a more interesting story than that. And that's Labor Day. Wow, that's a cool story. Some dudes died because they wanted like an 8-hour workday 130 years ago. Big deal. What's that got to do with me now at times? Labor faces way different struggles and way different forms of suppression now than it did back then. There's no Jack the Rippers attacking anybody now. We should be focused on our future rather than our past. And I agree. We can learn from our past, but that doesn't mean jack shit if we don't put what we've learned into practice. So, here's one lesson I think we can take away from the history of Labor Day. Capital and its lapdog, the state, are terrified of the possibility of a general strike. You can tell they're terrified because they're willing to lie, brutalize, and kill to stop one. They're willing to round up anyone involved in one and forcibly suppress their movement. It makes them take desperate, dangerous measures like publicly executing dissidents to set an example. If something scares them that much, there's got to be something in it for you. Something in it for you to take back from them. Right now, we're in a situation where workers have a lot to lose. Many of them are being forced into unsafe working conditions with very little, if any, protection from the pandemic. Others are finding themselves out of work, with only meager and temporary relief being offered. They failed us, and people are being impoverished by the ravages of a pandemic that the state failed to prepare for despite ample warning. Their failures will, as they always do, mean austerity for the rest of us. If we let it. There is an active, international, intellectually diverse, and organized movement building a general strike happening right now. It won't look like the general strike of 1886. I doubt, somehow, we're going to get 500,000 people marching in the streets, and even if we could, that might not be a good idea right now. But nothing changes if working people don't organize. Nothing changes unless we come together and advocate for ourselves and one another. Visit genstrike.org, link in the description, to find out how you can get involved. When August Spies was sentenced to death, he said this: "If you think that by hanging us, you can stamp out the labor movement, the movement from which the downtrodden millions, the millions who toil in misery and want, expect salvation, if this is your opinion, then hang us. Here you will tread on a spark, but there and there, behind you, and in front of you, and everywhere, flames blaze up. It is a subterranean fire. You cannot put it out." Hello and welcome to the Eyeball Zone, which, by popular demand, will now be featured at the end of my videos rather than just randomly sprinkled somewhere in the middle. Change is scary, I know, so too are eyeballs. We'll get past this. Here in the Eyeball Zone, we promote small leftist projects that require more people to gently place their eyeballs upon them. This one's hot off the presses. I got a brand new video from a brand new creator, and it's a doozy. Lexicogue, and I'm 50-50 whether I'm pronouncing that right, made this video, Hallucinatory Wokeness Syndrome, about how extremely online anti-SJWs have turned the word woke into a dog whistle for just like the public existence of queer or non-white people. How they can just say racist or homophobic or transphobic shit and claim that they're criticizing wokeness, a thing that they've trained their audience to recognize as irritating and coercive. She not only eviscerates them with facts and or logic, she's also just really fucking funny. She has an incredibly dry sense of humor, and I like dry humor a great deal. Please put your eyeballs on Lexicogue, you rascals. Link in the description. Do you have a small project you'd like to see featured here? Please view the application process in the description below, and perhaps you will find yourself trapped here in the Eyeball Zone. Thanks for watching my video. Don't forget to visit genstrike.org. I have a Patreon. You know all about it. It's patreon.com/thoughtslime. You can go there if you feel inclined to give me money. I've also got a second YouTube channel. Did you know that? It's called Scaredy Cats. It's where I go to talk about horror movies. You can find that one at youtube.com/scaredycatstv. Well, maybe you don't want to talk about horror movies. Maybe what you want is to watch a live stream on Twitch. Well, I also have a Twitch channel where I live stream every 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Thursday, twitch.tv/thoughtslime. But you know what? If you don't have time to do any of that stuff, maybe you could just toss me a like on the video. Maybe subscribe to me here on YouTube. That'd help. That'd be good for me, too. Happy Labor Day, the only Labor Day that there is.